that you're here with me today, John, to the second episode of my podcast, the Thriving Solopreneur podcast. And we've known each other for some time. Just to give a little of an introduction about you, you're an entrepreneur. You live currently in the UK, but that's not where you've always been. You've traveled quite a bit, and you've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. And you'll be talking to us today a little bit about AI and also how that applies to entrepreneurs. And I think you have some pretty interesting topics you're going to share with us. So I'm so happy that you're here. Very pleased.
That's my dog. My dog wants to be part of this as well.
How are you? How are you, John? So good to have you.
I'm good. I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, we've known each other for a couple of years, I suppose. We met on one of the elite mentorship forums, the EMF groups that go out there, and I think we've had a bit more of a one-to-one relationship as we've devolved and evolved our businesses together. So yeah, I think it'd be quite exciting today to delve into some of those points that came up for us and some of the things that, and our tracks have subsequently sort of come together and gone apart a little bit and come together. So it'll be interesting to see where the two of us are, where we're tracking today, if you like.
So maybe you want to start with that. Where are you today in your business? What is your focus at the moment? What are you working on? What is
My dog's quiet all week, never talks. Now suddenly it's making a noise. Just hold on, just talk to yourself for a minute, Luke.
So we're going to, oh yeah.
I don't know. So where am I? Yeah, I think as an entrepreneur, you have to wear a lot of different hats. And one of the metaphors I sort of see is you're in a fishing boat and you have lots of different fishing lines in. You can't rely on one thing as an entrepreneur in the business world. You've got to sort of have different fishing lines in the water and see which one's biting at the moment and work on that particular one. And then a day later or a week later or whatever, look to see what other points are coming up in the business that need a bit of focus on. And I suppose something I learned a long time ago in business was actually Robert Kiyosaki talking about the 4 quadrants of business. And a lot of us fight fires. A problem comes up and we deal with the fire, and that's not the way to run a business. It's the way to end up with a heart attack or burnout or stress. So it's better to jump onto things before they become problems. So it does take an awareness of working on your business, not in it. You get in your business, you end up burning out, you end up fighting fires. So that's something that I learned about a while ago. So I coach coaches. So I coach life coaches. So if I define life coaches, a lot of them are what I call technical coaches. So an accounting coach is probably someone that's been at accounting and just puts life coach on the end of their accounting. So I can come in and work with you and be your coach for accounting. And they're relying on that technical base when there's a perfectly good place for that. And an awful lot, most coaches are like that. But for me, life coaches, spiritual coaches is a group that I quite like working with. People that are usually on their journey. They've done the Tony Robbins weekend or the free 5-day thing with William Whitecloud or whatever it is. And that teaches you about how to create a new future, set your goals, rearrange your values, your limiting beliefs, that sort of thing. And one of the quotes that I always remember is Joe Dispenza's quote: "You can't create a new future if you're being held by your past. You can't set goals for the future if you don't believe you can get there, if you have self-worth issues." So I coach coaches on
self-worth
things that are really holding them back, and not let's find out a way of overcoming our limiting belief. It's really looking at where that limiting belief came from, why it's there, how to overcome it. We all have self-worth issues. Doesn't matter who we are. Some of us are completely hamstrung by them and we get stuck at home almost. And other ones, they barely hardly ever come up.
Mhm.
And I think this is
So,
really important for life coaches,
mm,
spiritual coaches, because when they start to go a bit deeper with the client, they have to be careful they don't get triggered. And that's the big thing that I'm on. If you're being
mhm.
triggered in a relationship, it's the trigger you need to deal with. Most people don't even notice it.
Wow. Okay, so you've given us quite a lot there. When I zoom out a little again, I see you talked about how to actually be in the business. So being reactive versus being proactive. And I was curious about that. I would love to ask you a little bit further on that, uh, like in a few minutes, like how you manage to do that and how you shift that and how you are able to strike a balance between those. And then you mentioned the work you really enjoy is working with life coaches and with spiritual coaches, people who they've done kind of, let's say, the surface level of personal development of that work. And then this is
Yeah,
something I can relate a lot to because I've been in big business mentoring programs, and there's a lot of programs out there, and they promise people, yes, you can become a coach in 3 months, you can become a coach in 2 months, and you're going to make the 10K a month and whatever. And a
yeah,
lot of people, they start that, they're very hyped, they're very motivated, and then they come up to certain challenges. And I've seen and I've experienced it myself. It's not so easy to figure those out. And if you don't figure them out, it's not so easy to get your business off the ground either, because you're kind of
absolutely.
stuck with those old patterns. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And you mentioned the self-worth issues. So I feel the scope of this podcast is a bit to really help those solopreneurs and those entrepreneurs who maybe they're starting out, they're completely fresh, or they're on their way already, and they're coming up against these obstacles, like you're talking about the self-worth issue. And maybe we go a bit into that, if you
I think, yes, good.
if
We're
you
on the same
please.
wavelength. That's where I would say that's probably the first thing that comes up. Um, there's always a sort of a fashion or something that everybody falls into each season, you know,
Hmm.
with what they're going to wear, the fashion to wear. But
Mm.
in the coaching world, there's fashions as well. And 2024 is the fashion of the 100K. Come to me and do my course or do my coaching, and you'll get 100K. Or 10x. 10x is the other.
Hmm.
Well, you know, these are a load of shit. A lot of a lot of surveys that I've read, not coaching surveys, because coaching companies are the ones making all the money. It's a second fastest growing company in America, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business. 95% of the companies making money, the Tony Robbins of the world, are making money selling the courses to coaches, not coaches selling their coaching.
Hmm.
Some horrendous figure, more than 90% of coaches don't make enough money to buy a cup of coffee. So you have to realize, you know, if you talk to a company, they'll sell you, and I think the best one I've seen is $7 for a weekend to become a coach. And I know lots of people now that just put coaching on their
Hmm.
business card, metaphorical business card, if you like, because they talk to people about deeper things. So they have no coaching qualifications. Coaching is not easy. It's been around since the late 18th century, early 19th century. There is a format to coaching. And for me, you can't really do it unless you start to work on your own stuff. So the first thing about stepping into the entrepreneurial world is, so my client that I was working with this week, she's producing a service. It's a practical service, not coaching or anything like that. It's quite a different type of
Hmm.
service. So the first thing that we're working on is, don't listen to what everybody's trying to sell you. You know, if I go onto my Google page now, it comes up with 10 to 15 different people trying to sell me AI courses.
Hmm.
Um, and I've done one run by the British government, and it's a social media marketing course. But one of the modules is AI, artificial
Hmm.
intelligence, ChatGPT, that sort of thing. And I couldn't stop from laughing. It's a government sponsored program, so it has to be, you know, it has to be solid, it has to be backed up, it has to be, you know, reproducible, all this sort of stuff that you would expect from a government institution. But it's stuff I was learning a year ago.
Hmm.
It's so far out of date that it's sort of like, so why are you trying to sell me this course when it's so far out of date? I mean, some of it I had to sort of think about, because like, really? No, they don't do that still anymore. So I think the first thing as an entrepreneur is stop reading all the press. Stop looking at, sort of, make 10K. You need to pick a niche, all this sort of stuff. No, you need to find out what you want to do. And then you need to connect with the outside world, because you can't stay in your little silo and you stay at home, especially for coaches, because it can come very you don't have anyone to talk to, so it can become very personalized, and you're stuck in the house, and that's not great for a coach, a spiritual type coach, a life coach, because they need to be able to communicate. So yeah, to be an entrepreneur is not to listen so much to the outside world, but get your own stuff sorted. Be quite competent and sure about what you're doing. You might not know everything about it. I think one of the things that's helped me as an entrepreneur is be on a continuous learning curve. Um, and you've got to be a bit careful that that's not continuous, non-stop. You sort of, I try and do it for an hour every morning, where I'm learning something new. Yeah, you don't want to get too tied up to it. You've got to be better, slightly better, not lots better, but better than everybody else, so that they can see value in the service or the product that you're offering.
Beautiful. I love that you touch on the learning. When we had Chaminda on for the first one, he talked a lot about he loves listening to audiobooks, listening to audiobooks when he's driving with the train, with the car, and he always keeps
Yep.
getting new information, learning new things, trying new angles. So that comes up with you again. And I see what you say about the coaches, and I've heard about that, and that actually there's very few coaches who actually make money. And I know a lot of coaches who started to coach and now they're not doing it anymore, or they pivoted to something else. And I mean, I feel that might also be discouraging a little when you're starting out and you're feeling that you really want to move in this direction, and then you see other people, they try it and they're failing. So you're like, how do you keep going with this kind of
I think one of the books that had a real impact with me was Simon Sinek's Why. You really have to understand why you're doing this, and if you're doing coaching because you had a great experience, most people do. They had a great experience coaching, so I had a great experience. I want to share this with the world. It's not a reason to go into coaching. I want to go into it because you can get paid, $5,000 a session. It's not a reason to go into coaching, because they are all very materialistic type goals. You've really got to understand your why, and really you have to read his book and then go further. In my map of the world, the way I see the world, you really have to touch on a why, and this is challenging for people that have not done the deeper personal work, because they're still consciously in their heads. You don't get why from your head, you get why from your heart. It's a sense, it's a sense. This is really what I want to do. So I do coaching and I do other work, but the reason I'm doing it is I'm changing the consciousness of the world. And it's not really something that's something that sounds flash or really good to do. I don't see that the world will be here in another generation if we carry on with the crap we're doing at the moment. And it's not sorting the environment out or buying electric cars. It's an overall perspective, on an overall view, a wider view of what's happening. What's going right at the moment. There's 43 government elections coming up this year in the world. 43 countries are having elections. Most of those countries are worried about who's going to be possibly voted into power. There's more Americans today don't like either candidate than do. And that's the same probably in England.
Wow.
How can you vote for parties into power that are going to run a country when the majority of the country doesn't like either leader of either of the two main parties? This is the sort of stuff. So, and the way I work and develop that consciousness is to A, to work on my own, but B, to learn, like you're saying what Chandra said, learning and listening to different people. I did a course with William Whitecloud last week. Fantastic course. Rather different to a lot of the other courses, most other courses I've done. So it gives me another perspective. What resonated with me is that a lot of what he was saying was the work that I do, but in different words. So it's that continuous learning. So that's the way I learn, but the way I apply it is to coach people, is to coach coaches. So I also coach sports coaches as well. I've worked with international sports athletes. But that's on a one-to-one basis, where I know if I work with a sports coach, that coach is going to go out and talk to 10, 20, 30, 50 youngsters or adults that he's interacting with. And most males, the younger generation, millennials, even myself, but millennial generation, they have very few male role models.
Uh-huh. Mm.
And if you sit down with a group today and you say, well, who are the male leaders in the world? You sort of you struggle. Napoleon comes up, Nelson Mandela comes up, but alive today, not too many in politics. It's difficult. So coaches in sports are invariably male, and I work with women as well. It's not that I'm gender biased or anything, but male sports coaches need to understand that they could potentially, they will be, not potentially, they will be the only role model for an
Mhm.
awful lot of young males coming up in their, preteen, teenage years.
Mhm.
They don't get that depth of interaction with another male. Very few teachers at school are male now. An awful lot of kids are growing up in single parent families, sadly. And that's effectively what happens. The male, the father, that doesn't know what it means to be a father, so they effectively run away. So the way I apply it is to work with sports coaches, life coaches, spiritual coaches, people that want to go a little bit deeper and understand their why, rather than just set goals. Now, setting goals is important. We all need to do it, but you can't come from the end. You've got to come from the why am I doing it? Okay, that goal is going to help me get there. So if I work with life coaches, if I work with sports coaches, it's helping me in my little way to enhance the consciousness of the world.
So you're saying that basically you said that for an entrepreneur, it's important that they don't listen so much only to other people, what other people might try to sell them, but that they actually do the work with themselves. They find out what their why is, which kind of gives them like an orientation, I suppose you could say, and to continuously keep learning. And you say that
Absolutely.
this why is something that can help someone to keep going, even though there might be, let's say,
Road bumps.
yes, road bumps, or even an environment where, let's say, a lot of the coaches that are there, they're not making money with it. But if you have a strong why, that might enable you to keep going, whether you're a coach or whether you're in some other industry. If you have a strong why,
Absolutely.
that will keep you going. And but
Absolutely.
what you said, what I find really interesting, you talked about the lack of male role models. The children who are growing up in one parent households, maybe they don't see their fathers so much. They don't have any role models at school. I know that because the ratios of male teachers, of males in the even in kindergarten is pretty low. So where do you see the world going if this is not resolved on a global, we might even say, I don't know about all, but I know about the
Yeah.
Western society, but where do
Yeah,
you see the world going in?
we're getting off the subject. We're getting off the subject. We're supposed to be talking about entrepreneurs. That's a big question. I did a
Yes,
webinar yesterday, which is
yeah,
working on that question. Um, I think, if we talk about male, I mean, this isn't a new thing. I was at school 1 or 2 decades ago, and I had
just to say something briefly, because you say we're getting off the subject. I think we're completely on the subject because I feel that the responsibility of entrepreneurs is to actually contribute something to society. And I feel as an entrepreneur, you have a lot
Mhm.
of ability to make an impact and also a lot of responsibility. So I think this links in with anybody who's listening to this and who's not only into just making money, but who actually wants to make a deeper contribution. And making money is obviously part of that.
I think that absolutely, and it comes back to what I was saying there about an entrepreneur not listening to the outside world so much,
Mhm.
becoming much more sure of themselves. So when you're grounded, when you know why you're doing what you're doing,
Mhm.
when you listen to the outside world, what's happening, you go, okay, well, I can understand that that's objective, that's fact, and also weed out what's opinion and subjective.
Mm.
So when we listen to politics in America, there's so much rubbish around that it's actually difficult to sort of pull out what's really going on. I don't know that there's much objective and factual in politics, when an election comes up. And so it's an entrepreneur, is anybody. Let's not narrow it down to entrepreneurs, but anybody. Marcus Aurelius started this with as within, so without. But we tend to look out. We end up in this materialistic world, chasing money, chasing the dollar, chasing outside validation, looking outwards. When it's inside. This is the why. The why comes from the inside. Now, if you read, if you get a Cliff's Note or an abbreviated version of Simon Sinek's book, you'll sort of sit on the surface. You understand it's a bit deeper, but it won't be what am I trying to say? It won't be at a deeper level. So you'll sort of sort your why out, but it won't be something here that is going to drive you, that's going to keep you on track. And as any entrepreneur, whatever service or product you're in, there's going to be roadblocks and walls put up in front of you. If you're unsure of yourself and unsure of your why, you'll get knocked by that. You'll get knocked by the figures coming out for coaches not making any money. Well, yeah, I do it because I want to change the world. No, I do it because I'm changing the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see it as a stop. I see it as okay, this is there. How is it a problem? Why is it a problem? What can I do about it? How do I need to go through it? Can I go around it? So I'm more able, when I know my why, which is effectively on the other side, to find a way to get around that, or not listen to some opinion from some coaching federation that's trying to sell me a coaching course.
So
so
it means basically you're seeing the obstacle in the context of your why, instead of, you don't have this kind of orientation and there's the obstacle and maybe it's huge, right? It appears huge because you don't have a context to view it in.
It's a block. It's a block, and it stops me. And then you're going to fall off, and you're going to end up unemployed or go back to your old job and hate your old job even more. So having that focus on your why allows you to deal with the trials and tribulations that are going to come up in life.
So that brings me to something, because you mentioned before the difference of being reactive in your business and being proactive. And then you mentioned kind of being more shallow and the depth you need, where you need to go into depth with your why also. And I'm looking at our current culture, let's say even reels, let's say the media, the way people are being presented information, or the habits a lot of people have. So what do you say about that? Let's say somebody's listening and they might be challenged to go to this depth. They might be challenged to read a full book even. So what do you say to those people?
Yeah, it's not like it's a race and you're racing to the finish line. This is a journey, and whatever speed you're going at, they say that leaders like Elon Musk and Bill Gates read a book a day, or 3 or 4 books a month. Well, I mean, I don't know Elon Musk, and I've only talked to Bill Gates once. I have no idea how many books he reads. Do I believe it? Yeah, I read it on the internet. Of course, I believe it. We believe everything we read on the internet. Do they? I don't think so. It's not that they read a book a day. They may read a book, but it's not. It's more their attitude to what's going on. So it's changing that attitude. Do you have an entrepreneurial attitude? So at the moment, I was talking to a friend the other day. So I do a lot of artificial intelligence work and ChatGPT and one of the things that's come out, and it's changing really fast. But one of the things that come out is you can now put all your information into ChatGPT, but have it ring-fenced within your company. So if you're a law firm, you don't want all your stuff getting on the internet, but then it's open source. It's free to the world. So you can't use ChatGPT. So you're going to get really limited, and your staff are probably going to use it on the side. ChatGPT, OpenAI has created this way of working it that you can put your information onto the net, so it's held outside your company, but it's only you that has access to it. I was talking to a friend, and he was sort of saying, well, law firms are doing that because cybersecurity is a massive thing. So we could actually bring this in and deliver cybersecurity, bring in this AI so that people that want to get into AI, it makes emails and that sort of thing, content, that sort of thing, a lot easier. Bring this in together. And so we just literally started riffing about how we could expand this in the business. You've got to, as an entrepreneur, have that sort of sense where you connect A and Z, no connection between them, but somehow or another you put them together.
Mhm.
And a lot of them won't work, but that's a particular sort of mindset. Now, I
Mhm.
don't know that Bill Gates, Elon Musk, yes, but Bill Gates, when he was young, him and his mate Tom, they started this little company in the garage because their parents had lots of money, and they built these computers, and so he was on one thing and he slowly built it up over time. So I don't know whether I would classify him as an entrepreneur because he stuck with one theory, and it's now Microsoft. It's huge. His partner, I can't remember his name. Paul Allen. Paul Allen was his partner. So Paul and Bill started this company. Now, Paul at 25 got cancer. Now, this is in the really early stages of Microsoft, and it was really small. He got cancer. So Bill said, look, go, enjoy the last couple of years. Go off. You've got lots of money. You've got millions of dollars. So go and enjoy life. So Paul went out. Now, Paul, I know this because I used to work on big private yachts, and he bought a big private yacht. And of course, he still owns 20% of Microsoft or something. So he's still quite wealthy. He got over the cancer and he went on. Now he's a movie producer. He's a film producer.
Mhm.
On his boat, he has a sound recording studio on, and I don't know the song, but one of the U2 songs was recorded in his studio. He invests a lot of money in indie bands in America. So he's somebody that he's got the money, and like I imagine Elon Musk is. He's got the money, but he's not like, this is what I'm going to do. He's sort of looking in different areas. Now, most
Mhm.
entrepreneurs are not going to have that sort of money. They're not going to have the money to back themselves up. And this is what I say, you got to work on your business. You got to pull back from it and say, well, okay, so I make pies and I'm a really good chef, but you can have the best mousetrap in the world. If you can't sell it, it doesn't matter. You can be baking the best pies in the world, but if you can't sell them, then it doesn't matter. Okay, so how can I sell the pies? Well, the schools at the moment are producing lunches. So why not go to the local school and say, look, I've got these pies. I can turn out all these pies for you. And that gives you a cost. You're not going to make a massive profit from it, but at least it starts to give you a bit of a turnover. Starts to get your numbers, starts to get the sort of the volume tracking along.
Mhm.
And from that, you never know. They have a parents' evening. So you supply the pastries to the parents' evening. You put your advertising on there. Bang. You never know who you're going to meet. So it's that sort of entrepreneurial mindset. So that's not thinking, working in the business would be thinking, so how am I going to get the best meat and the cheapest meat and what sort of ingredients and is the pastry right? Working on the business is how can I get my pies in front of as many people as possible?
Mhm.
And that's a particular thing. So if you're a life coach, a spiritual coach, how am I going to get it out there? A little bit harder than what I just said about baking pies. But you really, as a coach, you have to speak to the public. And Facebook is pretty much, it's great for chat. There's some fantastic groups on Facebook. But for selling anything, the monetary return on Facebook is pretty limited now, unless you're reselling clothes or that sort of stuff. So you've got to look for other markets. Is it LinkedIn? Is it actually talking in public? Is it joining Toastmasters? You've got to think like that as an entrepreneur. And then this is where the self-work comes in. The biggest fear, apparently, according to the internet, the biggest fear people have is speaking on stage. Well, I mean, I had that fear as well, but I'm the sort of person that goes, it's a fear, I'm going to confront it. I'm not just going to confront it, I'm going to actually attack it.
Mhm.
So I was in Southeast Asia, and there was no Toastmasters in the country I lived in. So, we'll form Toastmasters. So we formed Toastmasters because I was there at the start. I was speaking every couple of weeks. So I did dozens of talks. Luckily, I got a job where I was having to talk to the public, small groups, 20 or 30 people, but I was having to do that twice a week for years, for a couple of years. So I'm quite happy I've spoken in front of 1,000 people.
Mhm.
But I realized that, okay, that's something that I have a fear of a bit, and I have a fear of it, but I need to be able to do it well because I work in that sort of communications industry, I need to not just speak on stage, I need to be able to do it well. So that's just another way of thinking, how can I get myself in front of maximum number of people at the cheapest cost? Because money's always going to be a problem when you're starting up. And then and then of course, then the next step, which I'm always fascinated with entrepreneurs, is when do you let it go? As an entrepreneur, you need to you build your company, it's your baby, up until the first couple of years and it's starting to roll, then you're no longer an entrepreneur. You start to move into a business. So it's a quite different mindset. So are you an entrepreneur, moving into a business manager, leader, owner, or do you spend a couple of years, build the business, get your juice and energy out of that and sell it and start something else? So is it the entrepreneur or is it the product that you're selling? So again, why are you doing what you're doing? I asked myself that question 20 years ago. Why do we do what we do? That's probably a major part of my journey, and it's gone to quite a depth. I was talking to somebody the other day about possession. He was not possessed. He had a curse. Believed he had a curse on him. So yeah, that's my sort of field of expertise. It's not so much a field, it's more like several paddocks. I sort of a bit more like Glastonbury Film Festival. There's lots of little tents that pop up and you never quite know where you're going to be. I think that's probably what being an entrepreneur means to me. It's a great metaphor, actually. It's a bit like Glastonbury Film Festival. You've got a couple of main stages, but you've got a couple of dozen other smaller stages, which may attract 250 people at 3 o'clock in the morning. If I can talk to that many people, it doesn't matter if it's 3 a.m. I'll be there.
I see. So for you, it's important to have variety, and I suppose people's needs might be different on that. Some people, they might be more gravitating towards just wanting to focus on one thing, but it seems for you that's something you enjoy, or is that something you do out of necessity?
Oh, well, a bit of both there. I think I don't agree that we all have different needs. We all have the basic same needs. We all see them and perceive them and think we're going to get them through different avenues. So we all need, Maslow's hierarchy. We all need the basic needs, and as we go up there, we need to develop the skills, the capabilities. So we all have the same needs. We just have different ways of feeding them. So what I like doing, because I'm and I can be a life coach, I can coach you in setting goals and that sort of thing. And if that's what you're after and that's where you are, then I can do that. If you want to go deeper, then I pretty much can go as deep as you like. So I deal with inner child work, I deal with genealogy, I deal with collective consciousness. I have a number of different ways that I can work with you on your particular issues. So if I have so if I'm trained in Reiki, it doesn't matter what your problem is, my Reiki will fix it. Maslow said, if all you've got is a hammer, everything you see is a nail. Well, that might not be right for you. Reiki might resonate with you, but not your partner. So you have a fantastic experience of Reiki and you get your partner to do it and they have an okay experience. Or you go to Tony Robbins and he's fantastic and you get your partner to go along to Tony Robbins and they sit there bored through the whole thing and they can't really see the point. So
Which is so interesting that people sometimes can have the exact same experience we're having in like external terms, like they're at the same place, they hear the same person, but they have a completely different internal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't know, Tony Robbins doesn't know how he's going to affect the other people. And it's not really up to him to decide how he's going to affect the other people because he doesn't know. It's quite difficult if I'm delivering a training because my ego steps in and I want to make sure that everyone gets their money's worth. Well, I have no idea how they're going to get their money's worth. And some of them might just hate it and want their money back. Some of them might go away and go, this changed my life. Incredible, fantastic. I'll go out and sell it for you. And if you go to a Tony Robbins seminar, or the people that level that do those sort of conferences, Tony Robbins gets about 25 to 30% of people repeating, because he's the one that's created the atmosphere, the environment, the energy, the emotion. This is what he does. He drives the emotions up, and then he puts a positive belief in, and that positive belief is hooked in with the emotion drive that he's built up. So there's lots of loud music and lights and dancing and that sort of thing. And then he puts the positive emotion and then the positive belief, and then you go away, and that positive belief isn't yours. It's been given to you externally with a whole lot of overlays of emotion and lights and dancing, and 6 weeks later, you're back to where you were, and probably not as good as you were, because you realize there's something better, but you can't find it. So, I have to go back to Tony Robbins. I'm only using Tony Robbins as an example, as a metaphor almost. When I first did Tony Robbins 20 years ago, unbelievable. Really, really unbelievable. We did his university course, which is a month at different parts of the world. I was in Hawaii with him over 9/11. I've done, we did 1,000 people on a firewalk, and that was 200 meters, a really long firewalk. Really incredible experiences. And that brings up another sort of saying I've got, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. We're not physical beings having. So life is about experiences. And if you sit at home and you watch television and you don't get out and do anything, then you limit your life experiences. And really, life's about experience. That's not so much an entrepreneurial thing, but that's something that drives me personally.
And what would you say, because you say what drives you personally, what drives you in an entrepreneurial sense? Is that connected to what you said about raising the global consciousness? Is that very much interwoven with your...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To raise the consciousness, the work that I personally do, it takes... I run different courses, and one is a 7-day course. And we get two or three clients per trainer on that course. And that it's running, you're dealing as a client, you're dealing with your own stuff. Now that starts, we have breakfast, we start. And because you're dealing with your own stuff, it goes through until you're finished. Usually finishes at midnight or 11, whatever. That takes a lot of my time. Obviously, the prep, the planning for that, the week there, organizing, all that sort of thing. So obviously there needs to be a profit margin in this. I can't do it for love. I'd like to be able to do it for love. And that's the extreme. That's the high-end course. That's 15K. But I do other courses that are shorter and on specific subjects. The why is to raise consciousness. A chunk of that is raising my own consciousness so that I can talk about it. So when you talk about something, how do they say? When you learn something, you listen to somebody. When you sort of know it, you can write about it. But to really understand it, you have to teach it. So I'm very much in this stage of talking about high consciousness is one thing, understanding your heart-mind coherence or your limiting beliefs. For me, that's the first step, or maybe the second step on higher consciousness. A higher consciousness, for me, well, if I talked about it, you probably wouldn't, you may get it, but a lot of the listeners wouldn't. High consciousness is one of the parts about it is the systems dynamics. Understanding it's not, so I live in the UK, it's not the NHS, it's not the medical, the hospitals, the medical system in England that's the problem. It's not the fact the roads in England are full of potholes. That's a symptom. You've got to look at the cause. And then it becomes the system. To understand systems, you've got to be running from higher awareness, because you're looking on the system, you're not in the system. We were talking before about being in your business or on your business. So if you're working on your business, there's lots of inputs into it, and you've got to sort of have this understanding of what's going on in the wider world, what's going on with the weather. I mean, we're no longer talking about global warming now. It's changed subtly. The press is really good at this. It's climate change. Well, I spent most of my life at sea. You'd only have to be a seaman or a farmer to realize the weather's screwed. It's completely different now.
Mm, mm,
We live in Manchester, and when we arrived here 3 years ago, we get 12 inches. 3 years ago, we get 12 inches, 2 feet of snow. This winter, I think we got half an inch in the whole winter. Like 3 years ago, it would snow and it would be there for weeks. We didn't even we didn't get 2 consecutive days this winter. There's massive changes in the weather.
mm,
So, is it us causing that? Is it what's going on? And again, that's the climate changing. What do they say? England is putting farmers out of business because they've got to lower their CO2. And England puts in 0.2% of the world's CO2. India and China together put in 60%. But England's the one that's spending all the money and trying to get their emissions down 0.01%,
mm.
whereas China's opening a coal burning power station a day or more.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's you got to look at the bigger picture here. I'm not saying that England shouldn't be looking after their climate. We should have, we have a trip. I lived in Asia and I came to England here. We throw away a phenomenal amount of rubbish. I don't know where it goes, onto a tip somewhere, I suppose. Um, it's stepping back, looking at systems as higher consciousness. So going back to what I was saying, it's me learning and understanding how those systems work. So I do a lot. I did a webinar yesterday, and it's on values level. So, what do you value in life? What are your deep-seated values? And there's a large group of the population that value the police, they value the government, they value authority. And then there's another group, and you're not one or the other. It's not black and white. So you'll be predominantly, they'll be your higher values. But you may also value people that are entrepreneurs, value people that are building companies. That might be what you're doing. They'll still look after the environment. They'll still respect the police, but their values are slightly different.
Mm,
And then you have the other group that is more into community and more into looking after the planet and connection and collaboration. They value diversity and that sort of thing.
mhm.
So we have different values levels. Most people, 99% of people won't have really thought about that. But if you step back, it's actually a system. People evolve through these levels of values. It's like, what's his name? It's like, got his book, somebody, Hawkins' book on consciousness levels. As you raise your consciousness level, your attitude to the world changes. Another way of measuring your evolution. So where I'm going here is that I want to learn and then be able to teach it. And yes, for that I should be being paid, because we still need to feed ourselves. And I think a lot of life coaches, I mean, not life coaches today, it's across the world's in trouble. We had COVID, it closed the world down, some countries way more than others. Well, we've got to pay for that.
Mhm.
And people aren't thinking about the fact that we all are having to pay for that now. And there was some mistakes made perhaps by the governments. But at the end of the day, we've all got to pay for it. So things are going to be, and unfortunately now lots of people are losing their jobs. And now with the invention of AI, that's changing the dynamics of the work, changing the dynamics of life. They're saying it's the biggest thing since the Gutenberg press, when we first got the printed word. And I think it's a really exciting time to be alive. It's not, AI, artificial intelligence, could have a dark side, but if we don't control it, then the potential's there. But the
So,
positives that come out could be
mm,
fantastic.
mm. So when we look at it from a practical angle and we say that, okay, I'm an entrepreneur and there's this AI thing, maybe I've played around with ChatGPT a little bit, or maybe some people they haven't. But what would you say is the most important things to know for a business owner about AI if they want to use that tool maybe to impact their business, to streamline certain things in their business? What
It's
would
a
you say would
difficult,
be, yeah.
it's a difficult one. That I was working with a client the other day, and they have a service,
Hmm.
um, and they understand they need to learn about AI. And I was saying, well, I spend a lot of time. So I spend at least an hour a day. If you're getting into AI, into ChatGPT, it's prompt engineering. So 70% of the population of the world, I heard this on the internet, 70% of the population have heard of AI and ChatGPT. 90% of them use it like Google. They ask it a question. It's so that's a prompt. They ask it a question of, why is the sky blue? So if I had the same prompt, my prompt for asking it, why is the sky blue, would be half a page. That's prompt engineering. It's a career into itself. So in talking to this client, I said to them, I said, look, to get your marketing out there, to really get your brand voice, your brand in front of your potential clients, you can use AI really effectively. But do you do your service, or do you do AI? Because it's a full-time job. So do you outsource it? Do you give it to a social media manager to actually put all these different things in place? Because, you know, if you're going to put an ad out, or you're going to put some content out, so I put a quote out. So for I do shadow work, shining light on shadows. And I'll do A/B testing. I'll have a couple of just a picture, a nice, bright, lovely picture, and I'll have a picture of a graveyard sort of thing, and I'll put the same quote out, and I'll see the responses I get. So I'm comparing things like that. Well, that's not helping me be a life coach. That's developing my understanding of A, AI, and B, how the market works. So the first question you have to ask as an entrepreneur, do I outsource it? Because it's not easy to do AI, to actually use just ChatGPT. And then, as I was saying earlier on, this course I was doing, part of it's ChatGPT training, and it's a year out of date. ChatGPT, a month ago, ChatGPT started to become have a sensitivity to emotions. So if you wrote a prompt out and you put down the bottom, I really need this job because, you know, I'd really like to have this job. So it's a job that I've been chasing and a job that I love, using lots of emotional words in the prompt, it would change the response that ChatGPT gave out. Well, that was a month ago, so that's old school. You can have an argument with Gemini now, and it will argue back. And I've got a couple of contacts that have actually been kicked off. Gemini said, I'm not talking to you anymore, and just cut them off. So that you've got to be careful that, are you polite to this inanimate sort of thing off a computer? Do you use please and thank you? You can end up having an argument with it. So as an entrepreneur, is that something is that a path you want to go down? I'm asking a question rather than making a statement. I think it's fantastic, but I can end up spending so much time. I mean, having said that, so Monday morning, I generate content. So I'll generate an article of 2 pages, so 1,000 words. And I will have 6 paragraphs that I put up on social media. I have 6 quotes. I have half a dozen images. It takes me a couple of hours to get more content than I could have put it a year ago. It would have taken me a couple of months to get that level of content. I now do that every Monday morning. And then for the rest of the week, at a certain time, 3 times or 4 times each day, different types of content go out on across social media. So I think my impressions and contacts on LinkedIn are running at about 1,000 to 5,000 a day at the moment. You can definitely automate it. So I think so first question there is, do you want to completely outsource it as an entrepreneur, or do you want to sort the systems out? What do I want to put on? How am I going to run it? And then once you sort a system out, give it to a VA, a virtual assistant. Got some really great virtual assistants in the Philippines. English is great, and the cost is a lot less, because you need to be able to give them the system, because their job is not to tell you what you should be doing. They can say, right, I can send an email every day, but you need to know the content to go in there. So you don't really need someone with a degree in social engineering or whatever. You don't need that if they're just going to be repurposing, if you like. So is that the way to go? Is it for you to work through the content, and then have the system in place, give it to the VA, and the VA does all the putting it out onto the internet. Now, a lot of markets, a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily need the internet, social media. It depends, what you're doing, what your product or service is as to what platform is going to be useful. So at the moment, um, I do shadow work, so I'm a shadow coach. For me, that's TikTok. But I have to look at that because the Americans are about to ban it in America, and it's a big market, America.
Really? I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
Well, yeah, that I think they're in court on Friday. So yeah, that's how fast it's changing. We can touch on change. Change is fascinating. This is why I like doing so the coaching I do, because it's deeper, is moving into this mental health space. And most people don't have neurodiverse challenges. There are lots of people that do. So and there's ways of dealing with those. The challenge that we have is the mass of us can't deal with the change that's happening. So for hundreds of thousands of years, we lived on the plain and we moved across to an agrarian mindset. But that took generations and generations, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years, to move from tribal groups into fixed places. So then we had to sort of, the rules, the values changed, because in that situation, we had to protect the sheep, the plants that were the crops we had. So we had to get fences. And then, of course, we moved into this thing, well, I need protection. So in my village, I need some police, or usually a whole lot of guys with big clubs. But that took thousands of years, that evolution. And then we moved into the industrial age, which took hundreds of years. So suddenly all these families for generations and generations moved into off the land into housing so they could walk to the factory. Well, that was massive change. But still, it took hundreds of years. So there was change, but it took generations. We've gone through the computer age, which took a couple of decades, and it was like, when I first started working with computers, we had punch cards. So you had a big cardboard and you had punched holes in it, and you sent it into the office and it went through the computer and it came back. And then we moved on to these exciting things called floppy disks, which were floppy, 12-inch and then 6-inch. And so that was with the computer age. Now that took a couple of generations. So you can see this change is happening way faster and faster.
Much quicker. Yeah.
Now, today, well, 60, 70% of the world knows about AI. An awful lot of them used it. But 2 years ago, nobody knew how to spell. Nobody knew how to spell AI because it wasn't a thing. Now, it was in the science and in the sort of the technocrats in sort of Silicon Valley. But today, everybody knows about it. Now, most people don't use it anywhere near the level it's there to be used. But this isn't a generation. This is like 18 months ago. And the way the mind works, it understands patterns. So we have a dog, and the dog likes to walk around this track. In the evening, we go out for a walk and we go up to the railway station and back. And she gets upset if we don't walk to the railway station. And in the morning, we have a couple of different ones, but she's familiar with those tracks. Now, okay, that's an animal, but we still need to have our patterns in place. If we don't have patterns in place, we get worn out because we have to use our conscious, unconscious as thinking, what's going to happen? Is there dangers here? Where am I going to get dinner? Where's the toilet? All this sort of stuff we have to think about. So we prefer to spend a lot more time just sort of like, okay, I know what's going to happen. I get out of bed, I have a coffee, I get in the car, drive to the train station, I get on my 8:15 train, I get to work. It's I might have to change my shoes or take an umbrella or a jacket. Little changes, but we have a system in place. My father did that for all his life. He had a job where he went into the same place of work. We moved a couple of times, but within the company, a couple of times around the country. Today, what's going to happen next week? What's going to happen if Donald Trump gets voted into power in America? I mean, it's just seriously worrying what might happen. Just as horrifying as Biden staying in power. So we struggle to deal with this change, and this is the drive of the mental health problems that the world's having. So we can talk about the absence of males and the family dynamic. And that's just part of that thing, youngsters coming up. You can't say I'm going to train for 5 years to be a dentist to then go into, because I won't be in it in 10 years.
So, so what would you say on a day-to-day level to somebody who is maybe they're not an entrepreneur, maybe they're working a job, but they're listening to this and they're realizing that, yeah, this constant changes. And I mean, there's other factors like you mentioned, the that affect us, the global warming, or if you call it global warming, or if you call it the climate change, but also the things that are happening in our financial system. Let's looking at the US, for example, as a good example, that the national debt that they're having, but also other countries, prices are rising. So, and there's a lot of change. So how do you deal with this on a day-to-day level in order to ensure that you can still stay functional, you can stay productive, and you can actually move forward?
My top five
Mhm.
tips: take the television and throw it out the window. We don't have TV. We've never had television. The television news, whether it's CNN or Fox or BBC, it's not news. They're not telling you objectively what's happening. They're telling you subjectively so that you can decide if it's real or not.
Mm.
Most millennials, they watch YouTube for the news. They don't even watch the television. It's so biased. And because it's the BBC in the UK, it draws people in and they think this is what's happening. Oh, there was a shooting here and there was this person stabbed here, and then we think, oh, in my little world, it's dangerous. I live in an unfriendly universe because the outside is telling me what to do. So number one, throw the television away. Yes, America might have a debt problem and the prices might be going up, but I can't change that. I have to be sensible about my money. And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, the politicians in Downing Street in the UK and London, they don't know what's going to happen in 5 years.
Mm.
Sadly, and this is the power and the strength in Asia and China especially, is they have a 20-year plan and a 50-year plan because they have a leader that's elected. Now, you could say that that's wrong because
Mm.
we live in a democracy, which works really well. But in China, at least they know what's happening. And they
Mm.
have a fairly good idea in 10 years. Much more certain than we do. We don't know what's going to happen next week. So, but I can't affect that personally. I can look after myself and my family. So turn the TV off.
Mm.
It's all bad news because good news, unfortunately, doesn't sell. I used to like listening to Russell Brand because he really touched on some really important points, but I've sort of gone off him because he's sort of everything's negative. It's bad news. So Huberman is a really good podcast to listen to. I can't remember his first name. Huberman podcast.
Andrew Huberman.
Andrew Huberman, yeah. He has a really good podcast because he's
Hmm.
looking at different ways that we can look after our health. If you look at a
Hmm.
photo from 30 years ago, everyone was skinny. There was no one overweight. Now you got completely the other thing, and it's the crap food that we eat. And it's not anybody's particularly anybody's fault. There's so much work, there's so much stuff going on now that mum and if there is a dad, they both have to work, can't look after the kids. They're not going to get home and then spend an hour cooking a proper home cooked meal. They're going to get something out of the freezer, put it in the microwave. Okay, number two, don't have a microwave because it kills everything. There's no value in any food that goes in a microwave. We use it if we're in a rented flat and we have a microwave, we use it to soften the butter. That's all we ever use it for. Because people are eating ultra processed food. So look at the food you're eating. You know, we our treat is to go out and have takeaway like fish and chips or something because we don't go out and eat that sort of food because it's fattening, and this is why there's so many overweight people, which means that by the time you're 50 you've got health problems.
Mm.
And it's why the medical services around the world are in problems now because so many people are unfit. They might smoke, over drink, but it's the consumption of food. So Hoodman is a really good podcast, and he looks more at the mental health and the actual your nutrition and food and that sort of thing. Richard Brandt used to look at that, but he's sort of gone off that. So Hoodman's quite good from looking at the mental health sort of thing, and it really really good podcast. Another podcast I listen to is The Diary of a CEO.
Ah. Uh-huh.
What's his name? I can't remember. He used to be
Yeah.
on the um that program, but The Diary of a CEO. He interviews some really fascinating people, and they're the sort of most people now more than the majority of people have got a university degree or some level of education where they can expand their minds. So looking for ways to expand your mind. I mean, I was talking to my wife the other day and I said, shit, if we actually run out of power, if the power's switched off for a day, we don't have a radio to listen to because it's all through the internet because we listen to podcasts. So I'm trying to find a radio at the moment so I can at least be in contact for safety reasons. So look up some decent podcasts like Hoodman, like The Diary of a CEO, and other ones as well that expand your level of thinking. You might agree with them, you might not agree with them. There's somebody that I listen to quite a lot, Teal Swan, fantastic woman, a bit controversial, not everyone's cup of tea, but it gives me a different perspective of what's going on.
Shadow work.
Shadow work, the work that I do in shadow work, I sort of, she is a shadow work. Yeah, she does a bit of shadow work, but the work I do is more broader. It's wider. Nobody's doing quite what I'm doing with shadow work. But it does in shadow work, one of the free things to do is meditation. And I think that's, are we up to number 4? Meditating is a way of slowing the mind down. There's so much information, we sort of get out of bed. I don't know if you're like I am, but I roll over, get out, the alarm goes off, I roll over and I put the Wi-Fi on my phone and check my messages and then wake up in that order. There's so much information coming at us now. We get likes on Facebook and it attracts our attention. These things are there to attract our eyes. It's why the news, the BBC, CNN, it doesn't play good news because it doesn't attract eyes. They play bad news. So you had, I was in Myanmar and Burma and they had a civil coup down there. So there's a war going on down there and it's the only revolution in the world at the moment. It's actually a revolution that the population is fighting with the army. The army has been in dictatorship for 60 years. And for a year or so, or for 8 months or so, that was at the height of the news because that was, it was a war going on somewhere. And then Ukraine came along. So suddenly it slipped off the news and now it's Israel in the Middle East. Well, nothing's changed in Myanmar and the army is still going up and blowing up monasteries and blowing up schools and killing people. But nobody's heard about it now. It's gone off the news. So the press is more interested in keeping you watching them with bad news because that gets us going. It gets our adrenaline going more. And it doesn't help. I can't do anything. I trying with Myanmar, but I can't do anything with Ukraine. So yeah. Back to number 1, throw the television out. There's so much information coming into us that our minds keep tracking. We're worried about the future. We're worried about the past. You live in the present. And by meditating, and it only needs to be 15 minutes, but every day, not once a week. And it doesn't need to be an hour, but every day, just a sort of 15 minutes meditation, just slow the mind down so that you can start to get back in touch with yourself.
So what kind of meditation do you like to do?
I do all sorts of meditation. Some of it's guided meditation. But at the moment I'm working with Solfrigo frequencies. So everything is energy. So everything has a frequency. A rock sitting on the ground has a frequency. Water has a frequency. We're 90% water. So the frequency of water is going to resonate with our body. This is why it's really relaxing being at sea, being on the water. Totally different atmosphere. Being in nature is really important as well. So that meditation doesn't have to be sitting there with your eyes closed. It can be walking in nature. We're really lucky where we are. 5 minutes out the door, we're in the middle of the forest. So being able to sort of commune with nature, that what it's doing is it's drawing the mind down from having 100 thoughts going on or worrying about the future, which may or may not happen, or worrying about the past, which I can't change. It happened. And being in the moment, just allowing that little space for the mind to slow down a bit. It allows the body to sort of go into some recuperation, to recover itself. That's 4, isn't it? What else?
Yeah, we've got 2 things to throw out, which is the TV and the microwave, and then getting some good stuff in terms of, and also the food. You mentioned the food, right?
Yeah.
Throwing out kind of the bad food and getting the good foods in. and
It's
the meditation, which is kind of, or any way you can connect or you can detach from excess stimuli.
yeah. I mean, and I suppose it's the most important about it's realizing that it's not what happens without happens within. It's what happens within is what happens without.
Mm.
Your unconscious can deal with thousands of things at once. You can only consciously deal with half a dozen or so things. Part of the mind is aware. So when we lived on the plains, we had to be aware of sort of like, the rustle in the bushes. So we're going through the bushes and we see a beehive. There's going to be
Mhm.
honey in it. We're going to get sustenance from that. We might get that once or twice a year. So it's really important. But there's a rustle in the bushes. Or that could be a snail, or it could be a saber-toothed tiger. Which one do I focus on? The tiger.
Mhm.
The potential of
Yeah.
having a tiger. We don't know what's going to be there. We think there might be. So part of our mind is going to be aware. We're not on the plains anymore. If you're walking down the high street in London, you're not going to meet a saber-toothed tiger. But if you hear a tire squeal, you're going to jump back. So part of your mind is just aware of sort of any danger that might come up. So that leaves only a little bit of space for what we can think about. And what happens with the mind is that if we focus on we get out of bed in the morning and we hear that there's been another stabbing overnight in the city, and there's been a couple of riots and that in this town a few miles across. That's going to be at the forefront of our mind when we catch the bus. We're going to be a little bit more aware of that group of people look a bit dodgy.
Mm.
So being able to step back from that and realize, okay, well, I've looked outside and that's created this turmoil inside me. Look inside and go, I live in a friendly universe. I always remember I was at a rugby club. Now, rugby is a sport that's high contact. You know,
Mhm.
you basically got to physically stop the other person getting past. But they have this on the wall. I live in a friendly universe, and rugby's I play rugby. I coach rugby. It's a fascinating game. You have 80 minutes of people trying to stop each other, and then they go off and they sit in the bar and have a beer and have a chat. Don't get that in football, but in rugby you do. Rugby's a lot more confrontational. So get out of bed in the morning. Do I live in a friendly universe or a hostile universe? If you're watching the BBC or CNN, you're going to see all the hostile stuff in the world. And that's going to affect what's at sort of at the forefront of your mind. Get out of the bed in the morning and listen to, I do Tai Chi, which is really important on a deeper level because we need to get physically in contact with our bodies.
Mhm.
We hold a lot of the trauma, a lot of our shadows physically around the body, but we're in our heads, so we don't notice this. So doing Tai Chi or that, so I do that in the morning and it puts me back in contact with my body. It puts me in a better frame of mind. So when I go onto the high street, I'm more willing to stop and smell the roses because I notice the roses. I'm more willing to think about, see the world as a positive place. I live in a friendly universe.
Which opens you up to business opportunities as well as a nice side effect, I suppose.
If I'm living in fear, living in a hostile universe, worried about, sort of where am I going to pay the bills, or is that group of guys over there or people over there a bit dodgy, then my focus becomes a lot more polarized and I close down to opportunity. That's the way
Mhm.
I see it. It's a good point, actually. It's one of the things that I realized that you've got to have a more friendly attitude. I live in a friendly universe, a more open attitude to pick up on these opportunities. There's all sorts of opportunities out there. You know, if you miss it, somebody else will pick it up. But if you're not looking up and seeing the world as a friendly place, you're not going to see these opportunities. You're not going to talk to that person, or when I'm coaching people, one of the things I work on is your objective today is to get the checkout person to actually smile. They get a really shit time, the checkout people, in the supermarket, because they just get everybody's grief coming through. So make them smile. You don't know what that'll do because there's a ripple effect. They'll put them in a better mood. They'll react differently to the people around them. I think it's great what's happening in England now because they're rolling out these self-service things in
Mhm.
the supermarkets. And the supermarket I'm in is great. They sort of, we're going to open the self-service up and everyone will move across to there. And they, of course, still have to have a couple of the checkout things open. So everyone stands in a queue now in the checkouts. And it takes a bit longer because, people have more produce to put through there, and usually the elderly or the people that no, I can't say elderly. People are not quite comfortable with sort of technology. They'll take the slower route through the checkout. It takes longer, and people actually talk to each other, which is
Hmm.
great. So the checkout person I'm sure has quite a different relationship with the customers coming through. And you never quite know how that ripple effect is going to change their life, the way they interact with somebody, the way that person then interacts with somebody. We're connected with everybody in the world by about 6 people. Microsoft, no, it was Yahoo did a study, and they found that everyone on Yahoo, the millions of people on Yahoo, were connected to everybody else on Yahoo by 3.4 people. So
Crazy.
you never know how that positive reaction to somebody, that positive interaction is going to ripple out. Do you want to live in that sort of world, or do you want to live in the world where you just go through and you ignore them? It sort of comes down to that. It's a bit of a challenge for us to change that sort of thinking now, because we've been so used to thinking it's all about me, and I live in an unfriendly universe and I've got to protect myself and my family. You still do, but if you're pulling away from everything, you're losing those relationships. We're social creatures. We need the relationships with other people to thrive. We spent most of humanity in tribes, and now we live in houses and don't know our next door neighbors. Don't know our fathers because they're never there, our mothers because we don't see them. It's changing the psyche, and then of course, and then what's AI going to do? I was listening to Greg Braden. He's another one to listen to, but he's even more out there on the edge, I think. Um, he's he's sort of suggesting that AI is taking off. So there's already a person with a chip in their head, and that chip has 150 wires that interact in their brain. The chip sits just inside the skull. It interacts with the brain, and then they can control the mouse on the computer with their thoughts, with their mind. So what he's saying is, we're already getting into the conscious stuff, getting AI to that stage, and we don't actually know who we are.
Mm.
We don't really understand ourselves. What is consciousness? It's quite an arguable point, and AI can evolve and develop to a point of consciousness. So what is it that makes us different from an AI consciousness, in a couple of years when it's evolved to that point, and we don't know that. And we're
Yeah.
we're letting AI race away or race to catch up with us in the physical technology. So I think Elon Musk said today that AI will have everything that the humans ever known by the middle of next year, 2026, sorry, year after.
Wow.
But that's not consciousness, because it's using what's known. So it can't predict the future. It can give scenarios, but it can't know the future. We can't either. So the point is, what is consciousness? What's the difference between a highly intellectual AI and a human being? Could do another podcast on that one, but we need to sort that out. What does it mean to be human? I think, going right back to what I was saying about working with sports coaches, what is it to be male? We have this term thrown around, toxic masculinity, and that. Well, what does it mean to be a male? And then what does it mean to be a female? What does it mean
Which
to be
is
masculine? What does it mean to be feminine?
which is changing, going back to what you said about the change that is happening at a rapid pace. And I think that's something very challenging, whether that be in how our economy works, how jobs work, or even
Yeah,
what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman.
absolutely. And I think women, in my opinion, women are tending to become more masculine. They'll step into their masculinity a lot faster. They're more familiar with it because the men don't know what it means to be masculine. So it's not that, yes, it's changing, but it's not that they're going from this to that. It's that what does it mean to be masculine? Because there's no male role models left in the world, or very few. And that doesn't have to be the leader of a country, the prime minister or the president. That could be the sports coach. I mean, it should be your father, but an awful lot of people don't have fathers. Their fathers are absent. So yeah, the change is happening really, really fast.
And you've given us some great tips actually to navigate that, where you said insulating yourself from the negative news because they program us and our beliefs, and thus that affects our life and how we perceive opportunities, how we perceive our life experience,
It's still
and
going to
getting in
happen.
some,
The
yeah,
negative stuff's still going to happen. So it's not like I'm ignoring it, but I'm not letting it get a space in my brain. I'm going, okay, there's a vote in America next year. Great, cool. Okay. I mean, I have no control over what's going to happen.
yeah.
So not allowing the negative stuff to get a foothold on my mind and my head.
Which is a big argument with some people when they say, "Oh, you should stop watching TV," and they're like, "Oh, but then I don't know what's going on. I'm not taking my responsibility in the world," which is what you're saying. Actually, some things you don't have any influence on anyways, and you're getting programmed with that information. Or is that
Yeah,
how you would say it? Or
yeah, it's a difficult one. Yes, if you don't watch the news, then I don't know what's happening. So um but then so there's a local council election coming up in England in the next couple of weeks. So we have the sort of the four main parties here. There's a candidate for each of the four main parties. Um, well, if I watch the news and I listen to them, it's all going to be rubbish what they're saying. Oh, we're going to change if they're in the opposition. So if they're not holding the seat, they're going to say, oh, this guy's doing this wrong and this guy's doing this wrong. It's always easy to be in opposition because you can say he's doing it wrong. And the guy in power is going to say, "Oh, we've done this and we've done this, and this is positive and that," and really, it's all subjective. It's opinion, so it's difficult to weed out what is actually going on. So the local election, it'll basically be, well, he's got a nice tie, or he's green and I think green should be actually, get a chance, or I don't like the guy in power at the moment, so I'll vote for the other party. They're not reasons to vote. So if I'm going to vote based on that, or the
yeah.
rubbish I hear on the TV, radio, um, am I really voting intellect? Is my vote an intellectual vote, or is it just a spur of the moment thing?
So
You
it's
know?
about the quality of the information, what you're
Yeah,
actually getting. And if the
yeah,
information about the preference of the color of some person following their own agenda and kind of promoting that in order to get something, is that actually helping you to take in that information
yeah,
in your in a decision-making process even, or with your life?
absolutely. So so listening to somebody like Huberman or Diary of the CEO,
Mhm.
he doesn't have an agenda. Now, they both sell. I mean, they've got a product there, they've got a video, so they've both got 5 minutes or a couple of minutes where they sell
Yeah.
a product to make money, which is fair enough. I mean, they've got to make money. But when they're actually having these interactions, they're interviewing somebody, or humans just putting a point across, there's not a subjective opinion coming in. He's actually interviewing the person at a level that the average person can understand on the topic that they're talking about. There's some fascinating talks on the Diary of the CEO about AI. Now, you listen to a couple of them, and some of them it's really bad, and some of them it's fantastic. It's really good. It can do all this for us. So at least it gives you two perspectives,
Mhm.
both
Mhm.
perspectives of it. You can make your own opinion up about it, but at least
Mhm.
you've got both sides of the story. Whereas if I'm looking at a couple of politicians, it's like they're just telling me what they think is going to get them the most votes. They're not telling me what's going on. So, yeah, that's always an argument. If you don't watch the TV, how are you going to know the news? Well, I disagree with what's happening in the Middle East, but what can I do about it?
Mhm.
Um, if there's somebody that supports ending the conflict in the Middle East, then I'm all for them because people don't, especially members of the public, the civilians out there don't need to get wound up in a war. But none of the parties support sort of that America's behind Israel, allies, England is behind Israel, so it's like I'm going to support them. No.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah,
And I think you nicely closed the loop. And we also have the food, which you mentioned, and the detachment from excess stimuli, which we talked about in the context of how do we deal with all these change and also with the challenges that we might be perceiving around us or that are let's say it that way, or I say it that way, that are put into our head by the media, which might not be following our own agenda, which supports our well-being. I'm just putting that out there as an idea,
They've got
as a
their own
personal
agenda. And in
idea.
the news, the BBC is trying to sell space. They're trying to make money. So they're going to come across with an opinion.
Hmm. And yeah, taking in multiple opinions, which is possible a lot through the internet because we have so many channels that we can follow. You mentioned Andrew Huberman, amongst others, who is very good also in the mental health space and taking care of ourselves. And you said that one specific way we can start applying what we talked about today, where you said there is a difference between just learning something and then actually applying it, which you're doing in your coaching. You say you're applying those ideas, you're actually learning experientially, is to go out and make a cashier or somebody who's at the checkout smile. And that is a way we can start changing the way we view the world by making a difference. So I really like that.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
in closing, do you want to maybe tell people about what you're offering in terms of if they maybe listen to this and they're like, hey, this John is really interesting. What's the deal?
I work with life coaches, with spiritual coaches. I work with coaches that actually, if we see someone across the room, well, an event happens, it either informs us or it triggers us. If you're a coach, any sort of coach, and it triggers you, that's not their stuff. What happens within happens without. It's not what happens without. It's not that they've done something that's got you upset. It's that it's actually you that's got yourself upset. So I don't work with coaches to set goals and that sort of materialistic, superficial, almost stuff, the physical stuff, if you like. Still a really good point to it, and I don't not use it. But I'm more interested in the trigger. We're born with the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Everything else is learned. And you could argue even ADHD and those neurodiverse disorders that people have, challenges people have, are learned. Now, to a certain extent, some of them might be the quality of the food they're eating, the type of food they're eating. But if we get too much stimuli, then obviously the mind's got to understand what's going on here. So I prefer working with sports coaches, with people, not just coaches, with trainers. The way I sort of explained going on stage is that I'm going on stage to deliver content, but 50% to me is actually on how am I delivering it? Do I need to change it to actually pull at this group? Is this working? And so there's part of me that's running the stage act, part of me that's delivering the content. But the first thing with going on stage is this fear of whatever it is that you're worried about going on stage. It's fear of self-worth or the fear of not being enough, or where did that come from? You weren't born with it. So I prefer working with people on that deeper level, people that really want. It's not easy to do. We call it, shadow work is an umbrella for a lot of different things that I do. It can be inner child work, it can be genealogical, it can be cultural consciousness. I do meditation and journaling are the two easy ones, but I also do spiral dynamics and integral theory, so conscious development, clean language, which is metaphor theory, working with the way that the mind actually understands things. It's going deeper, and it's gonna be people. It can be confrontational because these are the shadows. These are the things that we don't want to face, but they're the blocks. They're the things that have stopped us going on stage. So I spoke on stage 20 years ago. And there's tricks if you do neuro-linguistic programming. There's tricks that you can learn to get yourself on stage, get yourself in the right state. If you watch Tony Robbins behind the scenes, he gets himself all physically into the right state. So that's the energy thing that he's getting in there. But if there's still a self-worth sort of hanging around, now he might go on stage and be fantastic, and then somebody in the audience shouts out something and it triggers him and it knocks him off his stride. If you're a coach and you're running through and you're having really good results with the client, and then they go down the mine, they go and their problem comes up and it triggers you, are you still going to keep on track? No, you're not. It took me a long time. So and I worked with my ego a lot too. We all have egos. It's not destroying the ego, but to allow the ego to step aside so that when something came up for the client that triggered me, I could put it to one side and not allow it to cause me to go off the track of what we were doing. So I work with people that done this personal development, they've done the Tony Robbins or the Peter Sage course or something like that. They now know they're self-aware enough to be triggered, to recognize they're being triggered, and they want to change that triggering.
And if somebody wants to go deeper with you, I suppose the platforms you're most active on is LinkedIn and Facebook. Is that correct? And you also have a Substack where you're writing. So
Substack, yes, Substack.
where should people best get in contact with you?
John Farrell at johnfarrell.emf. So the EMF that we've got up here, John Farrell EMF will find me on LinkedIn. The Substack one is the same. It's John Farrell EMF.
I'll put those links in. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So there's articles I put out, lots of content I put out. I work with individuals. I work with teams as well. As a team, business or sports team, that the relationship we have with each other on the field, if you like, in a boardroom, we have these relationships with each other, and a lot of it is on an energetic level, not in our conscious mind. Some people we get energized from, some people we feel, we can share anything we get, and other people in the same business meeting, we don't feel as though we can share as much. What's going on? And a lot of this is not conscious. Now, you do Tony Robbins or Peter Sage or some personal development course, you become aware of this. And that's it. Personal development doesn't teach us how to deal with these things. And I can use a hammer to fix you, or I can use, what I do is to use metaphor theory. So metaphor theory is allowing the client to develop their own understanding of what their fear of going on stage is. You're not going to remember that at 2 years old, your brother shouted at you because you were singing in front of the mirror, and you decided there on an energetic level, not consciously, because you're not critically thinking at that young age. So there's emotional hook that sort of, oh, I can't do that. That's frightening. How do I explain it? So little Johnny's 2 years old, and his parents having an argument, and there's lots of negative energy going around. They're shouting and it's bad, and there's no conscious thought about they're having an argument about money. It's all feeling. It's all, oh, this is bad. Oh, it's me, because we're at that really young age. It's not me and you. Okay, we don't live at that stage in a dualistic world. We don't live in separation. It first comes in when the baby's born and it's snatched away from its mother, and then sort of as the consciousness starts to evolve, it's standing in the crib with bars like in a jail, and the baby's in the crib and mum and dad are at the table. So there's that separation. So we move into this dualistic state. So at that really young age, mum and dad having an argument, and it's not them, and I don't know what the argument's about. It's, I don't feel good about it. And that's the energy. So little Johnny gets to 12, 13, and he's got this girl he's quite cute on at school, and he sort of, I don't feel good. What can I do? And there's a bully in the class as well, and the bully's trying to get in with this girl as well. How's the bully going to do it? So he's learned that by using force and pressure and pushing little Johnny over, he'll improve himself in front of this girl. So that's what the bully does. And so what does little Johnny do? I'm not good enough. It makes me feel bad. The same energy comes up, but now we're starting to think, oh, I have to keep away from people like that. Now, it hasn't come from the action, from the incident. The incident triggered the emotion came up. Now, most people go through life and they don't notice the emotion, they behave. So the person is not their behavior, but none of us look at that little gold dust between the trigger and the behavior. And that's the part that you need to work on. Now, millennial Johnny's 25, and the boss comes into the office and slams all his books on the desk and shouts and says, it's not good enough. We're supposed to reach these KPIs at the end of the month. We're not reaching them. And what are you doing about it? I've asked you about this. I've told you about this. I need some answers. Now, little Johnny's first sense is not a thought, it's a feeling. That same feeling from 2 years old comes up, and then he behaves. Now, it's not going to be the same behavior of little Johnny in the schoolyard, It's going to be a different behavior, but that same emotion comes up, and there's similar behaviors that come out. And that's millennial Johnny. So that's the emotion that needs to be dealt with. Personal development doesn't deal at that level.
Brilliant. You summed that up very nicely. Do you have any last words to leave our listeners with?
We live in a friendly universe, and it's all about what's going inside, and this the power of meditation. It's understanding how you feel, and only by understanding how you're feeling inside can you then start to change what's happening outside. Meditate, look inside. Don't let the outside take control. All of us do it.
Thank you, John.
That's it. I
I
thought
really
this was 60 minutes.
Yeah, we went over time a little bit. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, John. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Thank you, Lucas. It's
And
been a great
everybody
chat.
listening, have a great day.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And hopefully we'll see from you again sometime. We should do one of these on AI and developing ChatGPT.
Yeah, we
all
didn't
that
get so
sort of
much
stuff.
into the AI this time. That's right, though.
The question I ask anybody I meet, so I'll ask you now, if I could give you $20 million, or I could take you back to 21 years with what you know today, so you're 21 years of age, but you have the same knowledge, which would you take?
The
21
second one,
years,
I would take the knowledge.
$20 million. It's a
I'd take the
reflection
knowledge.
on how you see the world. Do I live in a friendly universe or a hostile universe? So many people go, I'll take the money. I think this is so exciting to be alive today. There's so much opportunity, but I'm not going to sit behind my desk and hide. I won't get any of it. Yeah, it's a great question to ask. So all those people out there, all you listeners out there, would you take the money or 21 years of age? Says a lot about how you perceive the world.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.